The story of the Natatorium is a story of hope.
People that were once upon a time invisible now become visible.
The story of the Natatorium, I think, is the story of race relations in the United States.
We were ostracized. We were treated like second-class citizens.
It's a story of exclusion.
It's a story of change.
The Natatorium is a story of taking a bad and making it a good.
It's a story of human beings struggling to make their world and their community better.
Water, cool, refreshing, invigorating, essential to life. It cleanses and purifies and uplifts the human spirit. But water can also divide and separate, overwhelm and diminish. In the history of South Bend, the waters of the Ingman Natatorium divided the community, creating racial segregation, anger, and humiliation for years.
It's analogous, I think, on a smaller level to the Montgomery bus boycott. You needed to have a Rosa Parks. You needed to have a tangible symbol like the buses. And in South Bend, it was the Natatorium.
Water, while it soothes and cools, it can sometimes burn and leave a scar.
My grandmother made me a bathing suit, and it was red. And we walked to the Natatorium, and as we walked up the steps, I looked at my mother and I said, why are they staring at us? Because I had never been confronted with bigotry before. And she said, just keep walking, Barbara. So we walked up the steps, and one of the gentlemen said, you can't swim today. There's certain times when you can swim, and there's certain times when you can't. To this day, I hate the color red.
The Ingman Natatorium opened in South Bend in 1922. Despite its location in a racially mixed neighborhood on West Washington Street, the swimming pool was never open to use by local African-American citizens in spite of the taxes they paid.
People were angry about it. They were offended about it. After all, you know, a lot of people move from the South to the North to get away from so-called Jim Crow laws. And the North was supposed to be already integrated.
Just imagine the feeling that I'm inadequate, that something's wrong with me. Why isn't it that I cannot swim with other little boys and girls?
Daddy went and bought a pool, inflated it, and we had a good time in the backyard. I never wore the red swimsuit, though.
Despite its large engraving proclaiming public natatorium, the building was not, in fact, open to the entire public of South Bend.
That word should have been eliminated from the front of the building, because it was not a public building.
They meant a certain public, not the public that I was a part of.
With the natatorium off limits to African Americans, they turned to more dangerous locations for swimming.
Blacks would go out to Pinhook Park, and you'd swim there, and a number did drown there, but that was the only local place you could swim outside of the natatorium.
Beginning in 1931, leaders in the African American community began to take action aimed at getting access to the public natatorium.
Prominent African American attorneys J. Chester Allen, his wife, attorney Elizabeth Fletcher Allen, and other black community leaders, Zilfred Carter, Charles Wills, and Jesse Dickinson, representing the local NAACP, committed themselves to fight this injustice.
These were people that actually lived on the west side of South Bend, Indiana, and took a stand in making that happen.
It always is risky to step out of line when you're a minority.
The struggle came to a head when the South Bend Common Council in September of 1936 levied a special tax upon the residents of South Bend to repair cracks in the pool area.
that gave the leverage to a group of black leaders in the community to say, this is public money, you're imposing a new tax, we're going to be paying the tax, we need to have access.
The African American leaders filed a petition with the state tax commissioner pointing out that their tax money would be used to repair a facility they were not even allowed to enter. The commissioner agreed with them, finally opening the Natatorium doors to the African American community after 16 years of exclusion.
In 1936, they were finally able to win access on a segregated basis.
It is notable that the signers of the petition were not just professional African American leaders who spearheaded the cause, but ordinary working people who put their names on this document that challenged the white power structure of the day.
It took enormous courage to do that, to stand up and to say this is not right.
However, the victory was limited. The state stipulated that African Americans could only use the pool on Mondays of each week and with no whites present, an insult to the black community.
They'd say that after blacks would use it on Monday night, they'd let the water out of the pool and put new water in. And that's what really made us angry about it.
19 years would pass until the Natatorium was finally desegregated in 1950.
I used it in the 70s to swim, and I was completely unaware of the history. And it kind of made me proud that what had transpired in the past made it possible for me to be able to use the facility.
The Ingman Natatorium finally closed its doors in 1978, but today plans are underway for the adaptive reuse of the site as the future home of the IU South Bend Civil Rights Heritage Center.
The important piece about the center is its location, which is in what we have now termed Museum Row, which is there by the Studebaker National Museum, the Center for History.
And yes, the guard booth where you were admitted is still there. And if you were white, you probably paid no attention to it. If you were black, it would have been the symbol of rejection.
Out of the weaknesses of this community grew our strength.
The Natatorium is just symbolic. It's a very, very visible symbol.
It's a great partnership. And the fact that the Natatorium stayed there all those years without being torn down tells me this is how it should be.
We need to be reminded of our common destinies, our common humanity. We're all part of the same human family, and that's what's most important.